Okay. So Brad Kuropala,
Here.
Richard Beidelman,
Here.
Bobby Nishimoto,
Here.
and David Meyer.
Here.
Myself, Tom Keeney, represents a quorum. Crystal Kua is not present, and Mahealani Maikui is not present. Mahealani did indicate to me that she would be tuning in via Zoom for the meeting. So we are, let's see, we're going to be taking some of the items out of order from what they are presented on the agenda. I will begin with approval of the minutes from last month's meeting. Has everyone on the committee had the opportunity to look at the minutes from last month? Yep. And can I hear a motion for approval of those minutes?
I have one kind of
Yes,
revision, on the Hamakua school thing. On the
yes,
order of business in the meeting minutes. It was, what was submitted was environmental management and report. And it just says management plan of the community. That's not good.
okay. Are you able to monitor to tell whether the recording will pick up what Brad said adequately?
We have a transcript on.
In other words, you're actually recording a transcript?
Yes, the Zoom is recording to the cloud and we can download it.
Yeah, a written transcript or just vocal?
It will produce a written transcript when we download the video,
Oh, well,
but we can see the. You can show captions on here.
okay,
Also, one of the members said they could hear that on Zoom.
okay, excellent, excellent. So your point is recorded.
All right.
And any other comments on the minutes from last month?
Is anybody seconded? Yeah, I will.
Okay, all in favor of approval of the minutes?
So it's gonna be,
Voice vote? Do we have to?
you guys don't have anyone remote, so I think no members are remote.
Okay, so,
Oh, you do? Okay, yeah, so we gotta do a roll call vote, and you gotta ask Crystal Cool if she has anyone in the room with her, and she's gotta turn up.
is Crystal here?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Crystal. A pleasure. So
Did it?
Crystal, do you have anyone in the room with you?
No, no one's in the
Okay.
room.
So all in favor,
So
we
somebody's
need
gonna
to-
make a motion with the amendments. He's asking that the minutes be amended.
okay, we're amending the minutes. Does that have to be a motion? The amendment?
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented with the amendment by Brad.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
All in favor? Does that need to be a individual vote?
Yeah, because
Okay.
we have, I see.
Only
Yeah.
if it's not unanimous.
What?
Only if it's not unanimous. When somebody's on video, you have to do a roll call if it's not unanimous, but if it's unanimous, then it's.
Okay, so let's ask for a voice vote.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Here, all
Aye.
right. The next item on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. There had been advice at one of our recent meetings that public comment could be at the outset of a meeting, not necessarily confined to an agenda item. In other words, someone could just bring up something that they feel is important. As corporation counsel, do you have a comment on that?
I'm not sure what the question is, but the public can testify at the beginning of the agenda or at the
right.
agenda item.
But can the public at the outset of the meeting give testimony on something that is unrelated to the agenda as presented?
I mean, I would have to look into that legal question. I've never been
Okay.
presented with that, but I would think that the chair would want to make sure
Yeah.
that the comments are directed towards items on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
Question.
yes,
In that case, how do people get things on the agenda?
right. I think that's the issue.
Well, that's at the end, I mean, it's usually, isn't it, when you addendum something to, you know, add.
So if members of the public have agenda ideas, you can email Ton and he can put it on the agenda.
Right,
But right now, we're just gonna stick to the agenda, unless the body wants to amend the agenda, they need a 2/3 vote, and it has to be something, you know, that's not reasonably important to a large member of the public, so.
Okay, so we'll stick to the agenda at this point. Are there individuals who would like to give testimony on items that are on the agenda? Yes. Would I be able to have you state your name at the outset of your testimony? And we'll probably try to limit testimony to 3 minutes, but we're flexible on that.
People hear me on the Zoom if I'm talking from here.
As long as you speak a little louder, we'll be fine.
And also, you're welcome to come and sit in this seat here. That's what we put the chair up here for.
All right. Okay, so Corey Harden, and I'm speaking on item 2, the general plan. And I want to thank the committee members for their service and also for the planning people who are working overtime right now. I'm sorry to say the 2045 general plan draft is disappointing. It looks more like a summary version or a marketing version that you would normally develop only after you wrote the thorough in-depth version. I found that I was recalling my days at Hewlett Intermediate School when teachers would assign us a novel to read, maybe like, you know, Wuthering Heights or David Copperfield or something. And some kids felt that cut too much into their surfing time. So they would go down to Press Store to the comic section. And there was a series called Illustrated Classics. And for 25 cents, you could get the comic version of Wuthering Heights and hope the teacher never caught on. And I'm not saying the 2045 plan is at that level, but I don't think it represents the county's best efforts. If you compare the 2005 and the 2045 plans, the 2005 plan is about 400 pages long. The 2045 plan is only about 200 pages. This is despite the fact that the island population has grown 20% since 2005. There's more people, more houses, more roads, more businesses, and more pressure on social services and fragile ecosystems and the island's cultural heritage. The 2005 plan has over a dozen pages with an extensive table of contents. The 2045 plan has no table of contents at all. So it's kind of like the train leaves the station and you have no idea where any of the stops are. A table of contents also provides something that's often missing in the digital age context. What is the scope of the plan? What issues are emphasized? Which ones are not? How does the amount and quality of the data, which the writers relied on, how does that compare for each issue? The 2045 plan says nothing about how it's different from the 2005 plan and from the draft 2040 plan, which was never adopted. But in the past, changes from previous plans have been clearly identified. So to address all these concerns, the public should have access to all 3 documents, plus clear information about how they are different and why changes were made. Should all be online with paper copies at libraries and the Hilo and Kona County buildings. Then the clock should be restarted on comments to allow time, probably something like 6 months for the public to review all that information. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Corey. I would like to ask if Marissa Harmon, who is joining us by Zoom, would like to make a public statement or a public testimony at this point. Marissa, I visited with by phone earlier in the day. Marissa is the asset manager for Kamehameha Schools. And she has an associate, Kali'i Kapali, who I believe is the asset manager here on this island. If I'm not mistaken, Marissa might be the manager for all of the islands. And she had indicated that she is picking up a child at 6 o'clock, I think. So we needed to have her statement, I think, next. Is Marissa?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you for presenting me the opportunity to speak. And I did find someone to pick up my daughter, so I'm here and engaged. I just wanted to introduce myself. I do know some of you from over the years. My name is Marissa Harmon. I'm the Director of Asset Management for Kamehameha's Agriculture and Conservation Land statewide, but I am based here in Hilo. So happy to be a part of your meeting today. As Ton mentioned, Kili'i, who's assigned to the Hilo and Hamakua area, is currently at home caring for her newborn baby. So I'm helping to support her in that transition. So I'm really here to listen. And as always, we're here to be a partner with the community. I don't have any particular testimony to provide. I think Ton was referencing a conversation we had earlier today, just acknowledging Kamehameha is doing statewide work for vegetation management on our lands. So that work continues. And we're here to listen on the mud lane discussion and anything else that might come up in relation to Kamehameha and the community. So mahalo.
Yes, thank you, Marissa. Particularly, I had mentioned to Marissa that I am in the middle of composing a letter to, well, ostensibly it's to Kamehameha Schools, but it's a note of appreciation of the very prominent below the road leading out to the highway in Honokaw on the Hilo side. There's been some encroachment or coming up of ironwood trees. And so Kamehameha Schools has taken the initiative to have all of those ironwood trees, which are approaching Mamani Street, cut down, as I think in terms of a fuel break or fire break for Honokaw's security. So I want to thank you, and I will be putting that thank you in the Hamakua Times this month. Yeah, thanks again.
Mahalo.
Public testimony.
Yes, is there further public testimony? Yes.
This is also on, on fire preparedness, and while you're thanking them, maybe you could add this too, which is not,
Yes.
which is a question. It says in the minutes that KS expressed that we need to express.
Identify
Oh,
yourself.
sorry,
That's it.
Meiju Louis from Papaloa.
Thank you.
That we need to express very specifically what we wanted, and that this communication would be passed to the administration. We've been notified that the trees have a lot of water in them, and so therefore they wouldn't burn. But I'm not sure if that refers to a fully grown tree, because there's been such low maintenance of the forests that they haven't been thinned. So a lot of the trees are like, you know, a toothpick, but 50 feet tall.
Yeah.
So I think that those would be much more susceptible to burning than a fully, you know, a full-grown tree. So that would be one question, whether they have really done the tests or the research to know whether this particular forest, not just that kind of tree, but this kind of forest that has been not maintained and has many small trees would burn. And the other thing is that along the highway, there are still a number of areas where the trees are too close to the power lines. So they move them back near Pauwi Low, but there's other places along that road that need to be identified and the trees need to be cut back in order not to fall on the power lines. And so we'd like to just hear when that might happen or how they're going to work with Halco to work that out.
Thank you.
Would you like me to respond, Tom?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, that would be
Yeah,
great.
sure. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name, just so I can address her.
Meitsu. Meitsu.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Aloha, so I won't take up too much time, so I'll try to keep the answers brief. So on the question of these particular stands of trees and their current characteristics, I'm not a forester, so I can follow up with our forester and get back to Ton and the larger body on it. But yes, those are generalized characteristics of this particular species and the behavior we have seen over the years. If open brush fires do happen to move into our trees, the wind speed in the plantation brings it down to about 1 mile an hour of traveling, as the wet understory and the wet trees themselves also tend to mitigate the fire at some point and allow the fire department to get ahead of it. So I can follow up in more particular about the question regarding the different stages of the life of the tree, I think is what I heard. And then on the question of along the highway and proximity to the power line, yes, we did cut about 8 to 9 miles of trees back in conjunction with Council Chair Kimball's facilitation between KS and HECO in 2022. And so that work was a particular ask of HECO for us to focus on that area. We continue to reach out to HECO as we have ongoing vegetation management. There are some other areas in Hamakua you can't see from the main road where we've done some work, and we expect more work actually to begin in the Agualoa area just above Tex Drive-In on that stand of trees near the power line in the next week or so, we believe. So yes, we continue to work with our partner in HECO to identify those areas, and just know that it continues to be at the top of our priorities. Mahalo.
So no public testifiers here.
Yes.
None.
Sir. And please state your name.
Yeah, hi, Michael Guth, Lawful Hoi Hoi. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your service. That this is an almost thankless job, so thank you very much. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but there's been an outage now for a week of cellular service and therefore internet service for Lapuahoi, essentially Lapuahoi Hoi to Ninole. So, and in conjunction with the roads that were discussed in the last meeting and the bridges and whatnot, the fragility versus the resilience of this community is really highlighted right now, right? One tree comes down, takes out one line, thousands of square miles, hundreds of square miles now, no service, right? So anyhow, thank you very much, and please consider resiliency versus fragility.
Thank you. Yes, one thing that Meitsu mentioned is that in my conversations with Kali'i, the asset manager on this island, that was a very specific request that, well, what she said was we need to be specific about what our requests of Kamehameha schools are. I think I had spoken to her in regards to sort of a general, well, it all feels sort of hazardous at this point. And her, I think her request that we come to her with specific items is important for each of us, because we all live in, not all of us, but we mostly live in separate areas of Hamakua. And each of those areas has, specific communities that I think Kamehameha Schools is keeping track of, looking at, but we need to let them know about what our observations are in each of those areas. So I hope that we'll be able to get feedback for potential problems that we see.
So it's still public testimony here and online. there
Yes, is there further public testimony?
anyone online, do you guys know?
They can hear.
Oh, they can hear,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, okay,
so
Yes,
We
somebody,
have,
there is.
me, Claudia Rohr,
Oh, yes. Claudia,
sorry.
it's your
It's
chair.
me. Hi, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh. Okay, I'm Claudia Rohr. I recreate in Pepacao. I'm speaking to agenda item 2 and 3. Aloha e Hamakua Community Development Plan Committee members and Planning Department staff. I am very disappointed that the proposed 2045 GPU LU map has allowed Huhonua Bioenergy LLC to change the 2005 LUPAG important agricultural lands designation to industrial, increasing the industrial designation beyond that in the Hamakua Community Development Plan adopted by the county council and increasing it from what it was in the 2005 LUPAG map. We, the people of the Big Island, must submit a request to the planning department and to the county council members to change the proposed 2045 GPLU map at Huhonua Power Plant TMK 3288104 from heavy industrial to productive agriculture, the predominant designation of the surrounding area. This would be consistent with the agricultural zoning and use pre-1970s as it was prior to moving the expanded Pepacao sugar mill up to the top of the Pali. We have all seen videos of the 2018 flooding of the power plant site during Hurricane Lane, photos of the cliff collapse, and the December 2018 bottom biology report produced by the DLNR Aquatics Division. Only 21% of the coral offshore were alive, not bleached or dead. Industrial land use is not suitable for the steeply sloped parcel because the stormwater runoff problems, erosion prone poly, and struggling offshore marine ecosystem. Huhonua's plan is to continue using its dinosaur technology and burning whole trees or worse garbage and discharging 21 million gallons a day of thermal wastewater into our marine waters under a private contract to try to get around the PUC and Supreme Court rulings. But the Huhonua boiler and power generator should be scrapped in the name of climate change mitigation and our state and county's 2045 zero emissions goal. In the matter of the application of Hawaii Electric Light Company, Inc., the Hawaii Supreme Court's incredible earth-shaking opinion was clear that Huhonua Bioenergies LLC's power plant facility threatens our life-sustaining environment. Quote, we have said that an agency must perform its statutory function in a manner that fulfills the state affirmative constitutional obligations, and that Article 11, Section 9's clean and healthful environment right as defined by HRS Chapter 269 subsumes a right to a life-sustaining climate system. The right to a life-sustaining climate system is not just affirmative, it is constantly evolving. The people of Hawaii have declared a climate emergency. Hawaii faces immediate threats to our cultural and economic survival: sea level rise, eroding the coast and flooding the land, ocean
But
warming.
I need to ask that you close your comments.
Okay, I'll end with sorry, let me
No,
just say
that's
the economic, this is my summary. Economic development and heavy industrial land use must be designated and allocated in appropriate proportions in balance with the physical, social, and cultural environments of the island of Hawaii, and not like a cancer that Honua has become. Thank you for your
Yeah.
long-range planning efforts.
Thank you. Is
I-
there any other
I-
public testimony?
Yes, to number 3 about fire. This one will be short.
Please make it short.
I will.
Okay.
Honua has placed logs on its site, even though it didn't have the proper zoning. And part of its reasons for wanting to change the GPLU map change is in order to rezone and expand its operations without having to get a special use permit. But the logs are there. It's very dangerous. They also have a very large biofuel tank. I don't know if they filled it or not, but the fact that the logs are there, it create instant ability to catch on fire. You can see them when you go to the public access gate parking
you.
area south of the plant.
Thank you, Claudia. Again, thank you. Is there any other individuals who would like to offer public testimony? Thank you. Then we'll move forward on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is announcements. The first announcement would be the what?
He's asking me something.
Can I say something?
Yes. What?
Can I say something? I'm not public.
Yes, yes, please.
I'd like to address this issue about, there's a lot of talk about fuel in the mountains.
So actually, you know, that if you're gonna talk about, you know, fire preparedness, you guys have an agenda item and that would be
Oh,
the
okay,
topic to discuss.
I will respond to that comment from coming in school about.
Right, you can respond. The proper time is when the board is discussing it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
save it for then.
Okay, but please don't let us forget. Okay.
Don't forget it, write it down.
I'll forget.
Okay.
Announcement.
The first announcement is the resignation of Desiree Moana Cruz from the Hamakua Action Committee. I, of course, would like to thank Desiree for her service. The next announcement listed here is a report by Councilmember Kimball.
Thank you, Chair Kinney, and all the members of the board for being here, and thanks to the folks in the committee that joined the meeting tonight. I have several things to go over, but I'm going to do them very briefly. But of course, my door, my phone, my email box is always open if you want to go into any of these in more depth. A couple of things that we have passed, I wanted to make sure you folks were aware about, is a change to the building code process. This is something that will clarify the time extension, the period of time that folks have to execute a building permit. There were different timelines for people if they were owner builder versus if they had a contractor. There was some ambiguity around when extensions could be granted. There was language in there such as pursuing things in good faith, which, you know, who determines if it's good faith or not. So we basically stripped all of that language that was ambiguous out there or discretionary and made it a flat 6 years. So if you get a building permit from the county, you have a flat 6 years to execute that permit. The time of 6 years is tied to the adoption cycle of the building code. And that's really the function of an expiration on a permit anyway, is to make sure that people are operating under the most current building code. So it made sense to tie it to that adoption cycle. And so it's actually retroactive to the point where we adopted the last version of the building code.
What
next-
happens if they don't meet the deadline?
They have one opportunity for a 180-day extension. But they have to be substantially complete at that point. And that substantially complete means that the building is finished to the point at which it could be occupied for the function that it was designed for. The second thing that we passed is, if people are putting on photovoltaic systems of a cumulative less than 10 kilowatts, they will no longer need an engineering stamp. So obviously the motivation there is to continue to make it easier for people to just install PVs. Those are kind of just out of the box now, so there's really no need to go through extensive regulation to just do those small installations at the household level. The other thing that we did pass, and I had brought it up to this group, was the negotiation of the Pepakeo shoreline parcel below Huhonua. That did pass, and our property management group is in negotiations. They're not in negotiations yet, but an appraisal has been done, and there's some other things underway. I know that Claudia has raised some concerns about that. Claudia, I have received all of your information, so that is being taken into account. So we are proceeding forward with that. It did pass. We have coming up in this next week, we're working on a long-term rental bill. This would create a tax class for folks that are offering long-term rentals. It would be a slightly higher tax rate than the affordable rental rate. But right now, all of the apartment classes, condominium, short-term vacation rentals, they're all in one class. And we want to break out the folks that are actually providing long-term housing and provide them with a tax benefit for doing that. So that's underway. That's Bill 104. We are also working on the short-term vacation rental bill. We are right now targeted to release that for the first hearing January 23rd. We don't have a bill number yet, but the draft is complete. The short-term vacation rental bill will be part of a package of bills, which includes sunsetting of the bed and breakfast code, platform accountability. So it's a reporting requirement by Airbnb and VRBO and others to actually tell us who's operating VRBOs in our county, so that we can make sure our registrations and our their reporting line up. And then finally, one of the objectives with the short-term vacation rental bill is to increase the availability of housing for residents. And so we will be, anybody that's operating a transient accommodation rental now out of an Ohana will be grandfathered in, but in the future, Ohanas will not be permitted as short-term vacation rentals. On the flip side, we've gone ahead and we've looked at the Ohana code and basically stripped out everything that made it difficult to build an Ohana. So it's going to be very, very easy to build an Ohana unit, but you can't use it as an STVR. And that's because we know that density is a good thing. Putting more houses in already developed areas is good. Sprawl is bad. This is an attempt to encourage that sort of behavior. There was one other bill that now I've forgotten. It'll come to me later and I'll be like, oh, but I did want to address one other issue. We had a resolution come through the council with resolution 372. This was a resolution that authorized Corporation Council $200,000 to Corporation Council, the attorneys for the county, to hire a special attorney to help us with a case that has been brought against the county around wastewater at Kealakekee. Much has been made of this resolution, and I think that it's important to communicate a little bit about what this resolution does and what it does not do. First of all, the case with Earth Justice is the plaintiffs. Yes, plaintiffs. We're the defendants. You know, what the case does is it says that basically if we were to lose the case, we would be admitting to polluting, and we would have to get a non-point source pollution discharge permit, NPDES permit, and we'd have to pay a fine. What I know that the community wants is actually the county to get off its butt and fix the wastewater problem. Failure to win this lawsuit would not accomplish that. That is kind of the first message that I need to hit home. The second thing that I should say is that failure to fund the hiring of a special counsel would not mean that the county would just automatically drop our position. It would mean that Sinclair here might have to end up, well, you don't do litigation
Not anymore.
anymore. But, you know, that somebody else in corporation council would actually fill in and continue to negotiate on the behalf of the county. So it doesn't mean that the case gets dropped either. It's actually, in my mind, more important that we have somebody qualified working on behalf of the county to negotiate the appropriate solution. A lot of what you're hearing is that we need to go to R1. And that would be very desirable. I think we're all interested in doing that. The issue is that, what do we do with that R1? We actually don't have anywhere to send the water. So we can produce the water, but we don't have anywhere to send it. And that becomes a financing issue. So it's not as simple as saying, okay, county loses this lawsuit, they're gonna fix the plant. It's much more nuanced than that. And then there's also a lot of other things that are in play, some things called consent decrees with the EPA that would require us to do certain things on the timeline. If we have these agreements in place, then we are eligible for federal funding to support some of these conversions. So as much as I appreciate the sentiment from which objections to this resolution, where that's coming from, I don't think the county council denying it will get the results that people think it will get. And so I just wanted to be very clear. I'm happy to take questions after. I don't want to get too far into your conversation, but I did want to say that it is my perception and belief, and I'm asking all of you to trust me now, that the county genuinely wants to fix this problem. And that everything going on with this lawsuit is not about winning or beating Earth Justice. It's more about finding the right solution that we can afford, that we can implement quickly, and that will have the kind of results that we actually want. And there's a lot more going on in that area than just our wastewater treatment plant. There's cesspools. There's a huge cesspool there at the harbor that DLNR is responsible for. So we've got to look at it a little bit more holistically. It is, I think having somebody on negotiating from the county side that has some expertise is going to result in a better outcome than to not. No offense to our other corporation council members, but we really need to have that expertise brought into the conversation. So I'm happy to answer more questions about that. I know I've used a lot of time, so.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
Very
All right.
fascinating. Yes.
If people are being allowed to build in Ohana,
Mhm.
are they having to put in a septic system?
Yes. You have to have a DOH approved septic system.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if there's already a house on that property, can that septic system be shared by the home that's there?
It depends on if it was built to the capacity for the additional bathrooms. So if it was originally built to have the capacity to take care of additional bathrooms, then yes, it could be added in. If it doesn't have that, then you have to do
Sure.
more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
Yep.
Yes.
Feel like I'm in the hot seat here.
You've been there before.
I live in the hot seat.
Yeah, right.
I work for DLNR. I used to work for DLNR. But there seems to be an imaginary boundary responsibility that always seems to be where both sides of the agencies tend to operate in silos. So this like solutions never get done, both
Mhm.
sides.
Mhm.
You have a suggestion as chairperson to kind of move forward and get people responsible for those issues like that?
Mhm.
Cesspool and runoff and things to be partners with you. Is there something that you can do?
Yeah, I made a commitment when I was elected to this position that I was never going to be the kind of council person that when somebody called and it was a state issue, I would say, sorry, not my jurisdiction, I can't handle it, right? And so, as all politics are, it's about relationship building. And I think there's two things that are going on here. One, the creation of the office, the Oscar office, the new Office of Sustainability, Climate Equity, and Resilience, is actually designed to be a different style of governance that is cross-sector, that is cross-department. So it's a big experiment. We'll see if it all works out. But then on the flip side of that, it's been, there's been a lot of work in relationship building between the departments within the county, but then also with our partners at the state level. And I've been surprised at how, with just a little pressure and a little continuity and follow-up, you can actually bridge those conversations. So one of the big ones, sorry, but I want to give an example. The cesspool issue, right, in general, the conversion by 2050, big problem, right? We got a whole bunch of them. It has always been the state's position, oh, that's a county problem. You've got to resolve it by raising property taxes so you can get it. We've begun dialogue with the state about, okay, what if we had a clean water fee that people who didn't convert had to pay? Right? Because people who are on cesspools, including myself, there's no cost, right? It's free. So we need to start teaching people about the true cost of having a cesspool. So what if we start collecting that fee? If we started doing that with the state match it? And so that's actually where we're getting to. So they're going to sweeten the pot by matching what we collect at the local level so that we can then help lower moderate income families do that conversion. It's been a 6-month process to get from we're over here, you're over here, but now I think we're actually the place where it's like, okay, this is a CACO thing, this is state, and this is county, we've got to work together to resolve it. So it just takes time and pressure. It's like geology.
Well, not that long.
Yeah, we're in the decades, not in the millennia, but yeah, it, appreciate what you're saying, but I think for so long, people kind of said, okay, I'm just here and this is all I have control over, and they pushed everything else, and myself, as well as I would say my other colleagues, just refuse to accept that. And if it's a state thing, we go talk to our friends at state and figure out how to get it done.
So we appreciate you attending our meeting.
Yeah. All right.
Any other questions?
Just one thing about putting a bug in the states here is one of the problems with all these 50,000 cesspools that we have in places is only 2 or 3 state approved options for septic tanks. And there's dozens and dozens made around the world that they've been using for decades that are much better than a lot of the things we have available here. So they need to get off their butt.
And if I weren't here right now tonight, I'd actually be working on my draft bill for the state legislature to address that issue. It's actually something we're working on.
Excellent.
As well as some pilot projects for systems that are kind of a hybrid between a wastewater treatment system and then a cesspool. Or septic, the solids are handled in a septic-like system. The liquid is treated.
Love to talk to you.
Yeah, I'd love to talk. I love talking wastewater.
Right,
But happy to answer any other questions.
Heather, your presentations are always amazing, coming from a point of expertise, and thank you. Is there any other testimony at this point, public? One other announcement, this is in regards to the communication item, letter to planning regarding email addresses. As you recall, a couple of months ago, we voted unanimously to restore our email addresses and to the CDP, Hamakua CDP website. The county planning department responded that they would put our email addresses back on the site if we requested as individuals to have them do that. There are 4 of the committee members whose email addresses are not now on the website, 2 who are not. That might be from oversight, or it might be from desire to not have your email address public. But if you have not, if it is from oversight, then you may wish to contact the planning department to ask that your email be replaced on the website. The next item of business is election of committee chairperson and vice chairperson for 2024. This is the 3rd month that we have addressed this, and at the last 2 months, we were unable to identify an individual who felt comfortable being chairperson for 2024. There was some intimation that perhaps consideration would be given, but in my subsequent communication with that individual, it seems that they would prefer not to be chairperson. Let me ask one more time if there is anyone on the committee who would accept the position of chairperson for 2024. And I will state that if there's no one who will do it, then I would continue until my term on the committee is there,
On the chat, we have a question asking, what are the requirements for a chairman?
I don't think there's any specific written requirements. However, I will say that it does take a fair amount of work. There is always a good deal of I think planning to be done. And further, it seems like in my own experience that I have been spending a good deal of time in communication with various entities, whether it is with the planning department or whether it's with individuals representing interested parties. So I think it does suggest the need for commitment and work. Did that question come from Crystal?
It came from Alana Wallace.
From who?
Alana Wallace.
Oh, Alana, okay.
It looked like Mahealani had unmuted earlier. Was that perhaps? Did you have something to share?
Is Mahealani, do you have any questions? Perhaps
Maybe you wanted to.
No, I was just gonna tell you, somebody asked something in the comments.
okay. So if there are no volunteers at this point to chair this committee, then as long as I am on the committee, I will continue doing so. But I would prefer not to. And as soon as someone will want to, step up, I guess, volunteer to do this work, then I would be very happy to. And I think Brad also had considered being vice chair with someone else actually holding the capacity of chair. So I think.
I'd like to, from planning's perspective, I think also it would be helpful or more ideal if the chair would not be a holdover as what would be happening with Utah after December.
Yeah, right.
Just in case, we do fill those spots that chair is just continuous through the year.
Yes.
Something to consider.
Absolutely. What I was going to offer was to continue as chair until there is someone who would consider taking on this position. I would, and at which point I would, prefer actually stepping aside. So as long as there's no one who wants to do it, and I think there should be, in a sense, because it requires some commitment. I think that individual probably should want to do this rather than it being a burden for them. It is a burden, but I think. So hopefully we'll be able to, on a monthly basis, ask if there are volunteers for this. Yes,
So,
I think it would be helpful to know what some of the perks are, and if you remember. That's like what inspired you to take it on in the first place. We need to return to that place.
yeah,
Because there is someone listening in right now, I suspect, I certainly hope so.
yeah.
That would like to know that.
Well, I think rather than drag on this conversation, we'll defer it. And at the beginning of next month's meeting, we might be able to take up that subject. So
Another item to consider is that you don't have to nominate yourself, you can nominate other members in the committee as well.
we've, yeah, we've
For future,
passed that one around the table a couple of times, actually.
Procedure, right?
there you go.
Yeah.
I think
So
about that.
this item will be deferred until the January meeting.
John, may I make a comment?
Yes,
I'd be willing to consider the vice chair,
okay.
but not the
thank you.
chair.
Okay, thank you. The next item of business is General Plan 2045. And we're very fortunate to have Bethany Morrison with us here this evening. And Bethany, I think, is the point person from the planning department responsible for General Plan 2045. And so it is a real honor to have her make presentation to our group. Bethany, would you like to take over?
Yes, thank you. I'm just working on sharing my screen. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bethany Morrison. I'm a long-range planner with the County of Hawaii and the project manager for the comprehensive update. So here tonight at the request of the committee to give a presentation, and then we will do some Q&A along the way. So the things I want to cover are the purpose of the general plan, the process for this comprehensive update, the framework that we're using, and then if there's time, we can get into orienting you to the draft, and then of course reviewing next steps. The purpose of the general plan is required by state law. Every county has to have one. And then our county charter, which is like our county constitution, sets forth the statement that this plan shall be the long-range policy for the comprehensive physical, economic, environmental, and social cultural well-being of the county. So it's a very important document for our county, and it guides decision-making. But from a practical perspective, it acts like a strategic plan in that it provides the vision for the future where we want to go, and it addresses the different layers of the components that make our communities healthy and livable. And it's used as a planning tool. So it guides decisions regarding land use. It guides decisions about how we prioritize our infrastructure and also our county programs. So just emphasizing it is a very important planning document for our county. And along with what it is, this has also been sort of useful information for folks, is to just understand what it is not. So it's meant to be this broad conceptual plan that applies island-wide, so it's not specific as far as the plan for growth or development. It's not specific to particular regions of the island. And it's not meant to be a fixed document. It's meant to evolve as conditions require us to make changes. And this slide is just a visual way of understanding that as well. So you'll see here at the top of this diagram is the county general plan. And then the things that are underneath there, I know it's small font, but I can just describe it to you a little bit, are community development plans, other functional plans such as our water use development plan or our climate action plan, And then the farther down this diagram you go, it gets very more specific. And so you'll see county code there, you'll see permits, you'll see our capital improvement budget. And the point of this is that all of those documents, plans, and decisions have to be consistent with the general plan.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
One of the things that we're talking about is affordable housing. And where, are we gonna touch on any of that as we go through this with you?
Yeah, I can go to that section and give you some highlights
Okay.
of what's in there.
I'm-
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
I also want to be mindful, Chair, of your time. So as we get through this, as I mentioned, I can speak on this for hours. But that might not be the stomach that the body has for this. So just give me direction as to
Sure.
speed things up or what.
I'm inclined to think this is a very important document.
It
Yes, this is the core of this
It is.
meeting, so please proceed as you wish.
Okay. So that, again, there's a lot of different ways of sharing information about this. So another way to think about this is the scope of the general plan. And again, it's very broad. So it touches on everything related to how we preserve our resources, how we focus and prioritize infrastructure, what our affordable housing policies look like. And then, of course, a large component of this is the land use policy for the county.
Now, when you
So-
talk about economy, are we talking about job creation?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it really touches on everything that impacts our way of life. And it also speaks to things, although it's focused, this is a county document, it still speaks to processes that are state and federal processes to give guidance to what our county needs and wants for those decisions as well. The process, before I get into that, just a little bit of history for our county government and our planning processes. We are a young, relatively young body coming into this. And so you see with statehood, 1959, of course. And then we have the individual counties developing our charters, which is how our counties then function. And again, that's where that general plan is sort of stationed in that county charter. And then our first general plan was in 1971. Then that was updated in 1989 and again in 2005. So 2005 is our current general plan. But you can see that this is only the third update to this plan since 1970. And it's important to note, less impactful maybe for this community, but many of our large subdivisions on the island were created prior to any of these laws being put into place. And so that's why we have large communities that are underserved as far as infrastructure and services, because they weren't planned. They happened first. And so we've been trying to play catch up and figure out how to manage with that situation. Okay, now I'm going to get into the process that we've been on through this update. We initiated phase one, which is the review in 2015. And we did that sort of via the process calls for a sort of a public announcement and a call for input. And that went out to the public, of course, but also it went to our county council, it went to our community development plan action committees at that time. And really just asked for people to provide initial feedback. What are the things that you want to see as part of this process? And so a good example of that is climate change. Climate change doesn't exist in our 2005 general plan, but part of that initial input was people saying, hey, we need to figure out how we're going to address climate change in this next plan. So with that information, we began to do a lot of research and analysis on those topic areas that people provided input on. including, reaching out and doing consulting with different consultants. We worked with our Department of Urban and Regional Planning at UH Manoa. We had some students working on things to really give us the broad picture of those elements that people mentioned. And we also did some public workshops in phase 2. So this would have been 2016. And those were large workshops in the council chambers, actually. This was before we had Zoom, but we did satellite projections into also the council meeting facility in Puna and Waimea, and I think in Ka'u. So we tried to do a little bit of bringing that concept. Anyway, so that was 2016. And then all of that information then was used to compile the 2019 draft, which is phase 3 here in this graphic. During phase 3, we came out with that initial draft and again held several public meetings, large meetings, but also topic meetings where we focus on particular things like land use, natural resources, those type of things. And we also went out to each community to gather feedback on that draft. That process was really successful because we gathered almost 4,000 comments on that draft. So that required a lot of work on the staff level then to understand those comments, organize them, and begin to sort of think through like what adjustments needed to be made to the next iteration. That takes us then, that was phase 4, where that information was gathered, analyzed, organized, additional research was done. That takes us then to phase 5, where we released our recommended plan in September. So that now is available for public review and comment. And the original comment period was November. Several community members asked that that be extended, so the planning director extended that comment period until March 1st. After that March 1st deadline, then the next piece of work is to package all that information, organize it in a way that our decision makers can understand it, and present that to the planning commissions, both the east windward side and the leeward side. They will hold separate hearings on that information. They can move at their own pace. Maybe leeward wants to spend more time than windward, and that's okay, because they present their own recommendations from that process. Then once again, all of that information is packaged and submitted to the county council for their review and action. So we're on the downward part of this process, but we still have a ways to go. And just to mention that both phases 6 and 7 are public testimony is welcome at those hearings, of course. And so there's opportunity for the public to be heard throughout this process.
Question, are phase 6 and 7 essentially yes or no votes from the commission and the council, or are they expected to modify the plan that is presented to them depending on their wishes at that point?
Good question. For phase 6, for the planning commissions, their job is to make a recommendation. And so they might recommend that the plan be approved with XYZ additions or deletions or whatever those might be. And then at the county council, then they can make small tweaks along their process. If there's something substantial that's completely different than what's in the draft, it requires it to go back to the planning director, planning commissions, and then back to county council, just to make sure that those considerations have been taken into account. So it can be a little bit of a back and forth, depending on obviously, what the needs are. Does that help you?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
The draft framework. So I just wanted to start with showing a weird process overview in the background, I'm not sure. Showing you the vision statement for this draft and explain, you know, how it came to be. Part of the analysis that was done when we started this update process was to look at the community development plans and understand, there was some work to understand if there were conflicts amongst the CDPs. If one was saying, hey, we want this, and the other one was saying, no, we want the opposite. And thankfully, through that analysis, that was not the case. There was alignment and consistency among the community development plans. Where there was differences, it was very specific to regions or needs of that community. But on a broad scale, when we looked at their goals, objectives, values, they use different terminologies, but those things were all consistent. Every community talked about the importance of protecting our agriculture. Every community talked about the importance of having adequate housing. Like those key components and values were all, you know, very similar again. So we were able to synthesize those and create one vision statement that applied island-wide, and that's what you're seeing here today. So that's a small example of how the community development plans were used to create content for the draft. And then just to familiarize folks with components of this draft, it's very easy to get bogged down into some of the definitions and nuances of these components, but at a high level, it provides that vision statement. So it's, you know, where does our community want to be in the next 25 years? And what are those associated goals? Then it gets more specific as you move down this pyramid into objectives, which are things that should be measurable, we should be able to report back on how we're doing. So that's really meant to sort of guide, you know, measuring our progress. Then farther down, you have policies, and that's really the teeth of the plan. Those policies are what's used to guide those decisions around land use, around infrastructure, and those decisions that get made for our county. And then finally, at the bottom of this pyramid is the actions, which are very strategic and specific things that need to be addressed in order to achieve implementation. And an example of that is, you know, there's several code amendments that are mentioned in the plan that are needed to actualize the vision that we're trying to accomplish.
I have a question. I don't know how many people in this room have read the book Land and Power. It's been around for what, 25 years or so. And it's about 700 pages long. And when I have said to people, if you can't get through the whole book, just read the chapter on the island of Hawaii. Because I'm inclined to believe that many of the things that persisted back then are still with us. And I think we need to try to rid ourselves of those things. And does this plan take that into account, you think?
I think so,
Okay.
but I also think, you know, there are historical, for example, just again, our land use pattern. We're challenged with that. We have existing lots that people can build on today that don't have adequate infrastructure or services. And so it takes a lot of thinking and coming up with strategies, which are included in this plan, to try and encourage growth where we actually have those infrastructure and facilities, and discourage growth from continuing to happen in places where we don't.
Well, the other part of that is a lot of that decision-making was by our government. And so the government needs to take on some responsibility for those issues. I don't want to use the word mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Yeah, so hopefully let's start to push on some of those historical precedents that were set. But echo your sentiment about that book and the power of reading that.
By the way, you
But
can
is it-
still, you could still buy the book on
So-
Amazon.
Yeah, it's really
I was surprised.
powerful. Okay, and then it's on to orientation. Is there a way people can close or move some of the? Sorry. Okay, that's helpful. That worked. Perfect, thank you. So there's been some discussion and public feedback that we're hearing already about sort of how the plan is organized. And so before we get into the plan, I wanted to give some context to that organization. And as I mentioned, one of the things that we did was work with our master students at UH Manoa to go out and look at all of the best available plans. What are those award-winning plans? What are the best practices per the American Planning Association on comprehensive plans? You know, what does that look like? And one of the things that we wanted to think about was how the plan was organized and packaged, because we wanted it to be, you know, a good document. And one of their takeaways from all of those plans that they analyzed was that these elements needed to be integrated. And the 2005 plan sort of marches you through various sections, and these sections are over here on the right-hand side. So, for example, land use, transportation, public utilities. The 2005 plan takes you through those, but it does not connect them back to each other and speak to the needs for those things to be integrated and consistent. And so that work started in the 2019 draft, and we got feedback around sort of the organization and the structure, and we worked to reorganize things in this way that you see here. So the chapters are on the left-hand side here, and the sections are on the right-hand side. And I would just point you to what I feel is the most important chapter of this document is the Sustainable Development and Resilient Communities chapter. And that's right there in the middle. And what you'll see then is the sections that are included in that one chapter are land use, transportation, public utilities, public facilities, housing for all, and a new section that's called integrated systems. And so if anybody, of course, people have knowledge and passion in different areas, but this really is where our policies that are guiding our decisions around land use and infrastructure live in that chapter. So I would ask that you pay particular attention to that one as you're doing your review and comments. And then the final point I want to make about this is our collaborative biocultural stewardship chapter, for all intents and purposes, is our environmental chapter. We took some time to really think about what we were going to call it, and we are getting feedback around that. So, you know, it might be tweaked a little bit to accommodate some of the feedback that we're getting, but it is our environmental chapter. And I feel like this community in particular has a lot of interests and knowledge in that area. And I would ask again that people kind of focus your review time to that section, because that for now is the section that is getting the least amount of comments. So.
We have a question from Crystal or a comment from Crystal.
Sure. Crystal, would you rather, you can go ahead and just verbalize your question.
I just wanted to ask, when you were, when you said the Sustainable Development and Resilient Communities chapter is the most important chapter, why isn't ag in there?
Good question. So agriculture land use is in that chapter. Agriculture as an industry is in the Thriving, Diversified, and Regenerative Economy chapter. And they're obviously very connected, but that's sort of how, you know, we made those distinctions. Was we want to talk about ag as a land use and what are those land use policies? And then we want to talk about agriculture and food systems as an economic sector and what are those policies around that? Does that help you?
Yes, I kind of understand it. I mean,
Okay,
I have a little bit difference of opinion, but I understand the
great.
differentiation.
Great, and that's what this process is about, is hearing, what people, reactions and thoughts that are going into this.
Yeah, I have a question. On one of the items there, it's called housing for all. I think most of us are aware of the fact that the cost of living in this state, in this state is quite high. And yet there's such a disparity between the cost of living and what the income that people make. And does this plan address that?
That's why it's called Housing for All. It's because we really wanted to look at, we have some policies and strategies for our lowest economic sector. And then it's, what's happening across the nation is we're missing the middle income component because we don't have the funding. We have funding to provide for our lower income. Through.
But that lower income is not a living wage.
True, and that gets adjusted, I think annually,
They're adjusting it, I think, every 2 years.
our income requirements for. Yeah,
Yeah, but
so that
that's
does
just-
get adjusted
Yeah,
because of that.
Yeah, but it's minimum wage and it's still not a living wage.
I agree, I agree. So the attempt here is again, sort of looking at what are the needs for this particular economic sector? What are the needs for the next one? And then, making sure that we're still providing some economic opportunity for the, more,
Is this plan addressing remote work?
yes. Yeah, not in housing, that's gonna be
No,
in our
no.
economic section, but it is addressing that, yes.
And are they addressing, trying to encourage mainland companies to?
Yes.
To-
Yes.
To bring those kinds of jobs here?
Yes. And I think too, when we look at that innovation section that's in our economic chapter, it's really keeping in mind that, we have economic forecasts and population forecasts out to the year 2045 at this point. So we know what our population growth looks like. We know what our job growth looks like, but those calculations, the farther you get out, the less certain our economists are of that curve and what the things might happen. And so our innovation chapter is meant to be that place of allowing for things to evolve and our processes to encourage that innovation, though we might not even know about or think about right now as we're working through this draft.
And so you are addressing remote work.
Yes.
Because and for example, I live in Onondaga. All you gotta do is drive down Romani Street. They've got so many empty storefronts. And I'm saying, well, if they're not gonna be storefronts, can they be satellite county work
Yeah.
facilities?
That's great. And some of that is included in here. It's called shared workspace.
But shared could be remotely.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I think too, just looking at that very specific strategy as far as remote work. Again, we have a lot of communities that are far apart and it takes a lot of transportation needs to access our job centers. And so if there's a way that we can reduce the vehicle miles that are being put out, the cars that are on the road, people's costs, of course, associated with having those cars on the road. And then our traffic, there's just a lot of components to that. If we can keep people closer to where they live as far as their work and their
So if you're
economic
talking,
needs.
if you're talking about remote work, then are you addressing infrastructure needs to make
Yes.
that happen?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna keep us going so
Yeah.
that we can get into some of your examples. Before I get into the draft, I want to give a little bit of framing and context. And I think, yes, I have some other slides in here before we get into the draft to address some of the discussion and feedback around specific land use maps for this community. But I wanted to frame it with the purpose and authority of that future land use map. It really is meant to be a future-looking guiding tool. It does not change existing zoning. It does not change our existing subdivision patterns. It really guides, the next decision about, if someone wants to come in and do a change of zone, for example, this future land use map would guide decisions around that change of zone, but it doesn't take away anybody's existing zoning or subdivision. And that's very important context to set because there's been a lot of, even just the terminology can get confusing, right? Because we have many layers. In the state, we have a state land use layer, we have our general plan land use layer, and we also have our zoning layer. So it can get confusing. So I just wanted to set that tone. That this,
As long as we're confused at a higher level.
at a higher level. But just think, like it's future, right? It's forward looking and it's the future. So it doesn't change what's happening right now. It changes decisions that are being made about the future. All right, are we more confused or have questions? Okay.
Just one question, can this be shared afterwards?
Absolutely, yeah, and a lot of this information is already available on our website, so we can point to that too.
But I think there's a couple of things that I think for clarity, first of all, the general plan, it has been determined by the courts to have the force of law, right? So the guidance you're talking about within the general plan, that's why it's so critical for input, it does have the force of law. The LUPEG maps, or the maps, the land use pattern allocation guide, is a guide that is part of the general plan. And an example recently was the property in Keaukaha, which is the general plan LUPEG map, the guide suggested would make sense as industrial. But the council came back and said, well, under the current circumstances, we don't think that that is that right guidance on that location. So we have the ability to get a specific case, look at the general plan, see what it's guiding, but then make a different decision based on the current time, because that was established in 2005. The example that was brought up earlier with respect to the land use by Huhonua, that has already been subject to a land use zoning change to industrial, and that's why it's shown. It's not that the general plan being provided now changes that land use pattern. It was actually changed by ordinance at a different time. Am I correct on that, Bethany?
Yes, for that example.
Yeah, I'm just presenting an example of how these different actions and then play with each other, future, past, current.
When,
The general plan, in addition to showing changes that are recommended, actually also reflect ordinances that have already taken place, and that's an example of that.
when was that zoning of
2005,
Huhonua?
2005, I believe.
Well, in the current, in the existing LUPAG map, the heavy industrial zoning at Huhonua is considerably smaller
Correct.
than the proposed
Right. and
general
so
plan
there
map.
were one or two rezoning ordinances, and I actually have the date wrong about that, because that was the original subdivision. I have to double check on the exact ordinance that amended the zoning. So that there was a rezoning ordinance that took place in the late 2000s. Or sorry, like 2000, 2011, maybe.
Heather, we're having difficulty hearing you on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You could just
Yeah,
be a little louder or come a little closer back.
I'll find it for you. There was.
Yeah, and I'm interested in that answer too, so, but I can hardly hear you.
Yes, I think this is an important point. And I think one that's of interest to a number of people here. And so would you be able to somehow or other supply
Yeah,
a
somebody over there that's not running Zoom can access the planning department's map, GIS map, you can pull up the ordinance there. But you can go on with anything.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's important, and it did make me think of one other, one other clarification. In 2005 and previous general plans as well, you know, obviously, we always use the best tools that are available to us. We didn't have GIS or geographic information systems in 2005. And so there was a lot of hand-drawn overlays and different components that were used. And part of the concept in this general plan and land use map is that it's not meant to be a parcel specific bounded interpretation. Zoning is very parcel specific. You have, I'll use industrial just because you've mentioned it. You have industrial zoning on this property, and therefore you have permitted uses that you can do on this property. The general plan might say, in general, we want this area to be residential. That doesn't mean that there's a boundary around that. It means generally in this area. So as decision makers are making decisions about that, there's some interpretation about what, you know, what does that sort of blob look like for that area? But using GIS, we've tried to get a little bit more sophisticated. Obviously, there are natural boundaries, there are gulches and things that are obvious that we can use. And there's also physical boundaries, roadways and different things that we can use. So this map looks a lot more parcel specific than our 2005 loop had, purely because we have a tool that's different. We're able to access different mapping information as we're creating. But it's still meant to be a graphical representation of what, you know, the direction we want to go for that area. It's not meant to be a meets and bounds specific boundary.
Or, go ahead, Brad.
So, you know, when I'm, you know, reviewing it and trying to play around with the swipe tool,
Yeah.
I mean, it is pretty clear that the new general draft general plan is leaning towards the parcel specific designation. And so that does have some implications, and in this case, you know, it's conflict with what the zoning was supposedly in place, but then it was added and expanded, you know, physically expanded. And so I think that's, you know, the concern, because it is a document that has the broader umbrella,
Yeah.
you know, guidance.
Yeah, and I've heard that feedback, you know, as far as, yeah, it looks parcel specific.
Yeah.
So I think if there's a better way, if you guys have comments, suggestions about that, we're open to, you know, graphically, what does that look like, so that that's communicated properly. But again, we have a lot more mapping capabilities now that we can use to make those decisions. So that's kind of, and just keep that in mind as we look at it.
Does that have to be approved by the planning commission then, that extension of that designation?
This general plan has to be approved by the county council.
No, I mean, in the case of that, that area in the Bakeo.
Yeah, let's just let's get into that so that I can give you a little bit more context, because I've heard that mentioned a couple times. Okay. So, for Peppercale, important to keep in mind that this is proposed, so nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. We have the 2005, this graphic in the middle. I don't have my cursor. There we go. This graphic in the middle is the 2005 loop tag. That is what's being used currently for any decision making, you know, in this area. What is being proposed, and I'll open up the map, is the things that people are a little bit more concerned about, the shape, which looks more like the zoning graphic here on the right hand side. I also included in this slide, just to give some context, the Hamakua Community Development Plan, which we relied on heavily during this process, because Hamakua actually, you folks did a significant mapping component that was very easy for us to incorporate into this process. Other community development plans didn't get that specific and had conceptual ideas that we had to then try and interpret and create, but Hamakua, it was pretty easy to say, hey, this is the map, and we're bringing that over. However, there are some modifications in the proposal. And let me just open that 1 second so we can look at that. Anton, also, anytime if you guys need a break too, like. That, so, okay.
Sure.
Okay, I'm currently sharing now the proposed land use map that's available on our website. And I'll just, for the sake of this conversation, I'm gonna not do a whole lot of orientation to the platform, but I'm just gonna zoom in and talk about this area in particular. You'll see as I zoom in, there have been some comments made already in this area, and you can view those and understand those as well. I'm gonna turn those off for now, just so they kind of cover things up. So what you're seeing now is proposed the industrial area for this particular subject area here. And what we can do is look at a couple different things that we've added to this project. Originally, we did not have the existing adopted loop tag. We asked our consultant, please add that. And then even more recently, we got a request to add zoning, so we added that here as well, trying to make this so that everybody has enough information to provide feedback. I turned on our adopted loop tag, and then as Brad mentioned, we have a swipe tool where you can sort of go back and forth and see the differences. And so you'll see that the 2005 has this area along the coast. And then the proposed then mirrors the current zoning for the property. And there were several reasons for that, that decision that was made. Just want to clarify that we have not gotten any requests from Honua or Honua or any of those folks as far as requests to make any modifications. This work that's shown is what's being proposed from the planning department based on the analysis that was completed by our consultant. So again, the decision here was really in alignment with, and I can turn off that feature to show you. In alignment with the existing zoning and also an analysis of the actual use that's happening on the property. So you could look at the imagery, and we have that here as well. Just to show that that use is really bounded by that existing zone. So that's the context there, and again, open to comments, feedback, whatever, but I did want to just sort of set the record straight that we have not gotten any requests from Honua or that, agent to this matter. And it's really based on the existing use and the existing zoning.
So the existing zoning that is reflected in the gray area here.
Yeah.
Goes back how far? How long has that been zoned?
Since they did the.
I think it's 2006, just,
Okay.
So nothing's changed since then as far as that.
I see,
zone.
I see, yeah.
So I think, my comment on that definitely is, we are all aware of the legacy, zoning and the history of the plantation industrial. And at the same time, what this is purported to be is a future guidance document. And so therefore, I think, it behooves us to recognize that, those kinds of adjacencies of having heavy industrial impact on our sensitive environmental areas, which are the coastlines, water, surrounding land use, because that has, been shifted from the important ag lands from former sugarcane to now a lot of residential. And so I think, the sentiment that I know from the Hamakua CDP side was to then, since you mentioned it's an evolving document for us to then provide that guidance and shift away towards those types of adjacencies that we know are not desired or preferred from an environmental, social, cultural, and all.
So, I need input on this map so that we can show, hey, there is, all these concerns and things that you bring up as part of that documentation. As I mentioned, there have been some comments already, and we can look at those, but I would encourage folks to provide that additional comments.
So, does the county feel that there is a need for more heavy industrial areas? And if so, are there other alternatives that could be extended elsewhere? And again, I'm not too sure why.
Yeah, there was some analysis done on industrial. There are a couple places on the island in particular that are just lacking. And so we end up with special permits, which are usually, or not usually, they're on ag land to do industrial type uses because there is not that availability of the proper industrial sites. So we did try to create a few of those through this process. Mostly that is in the Waimea area, where again, there was just a real deficiency there. And then some feedback, I think, in Kona around maintaining industrial. So what can happen over time, and this is included in the draft as well, is you have an industrial place and development continues to grow and continues to happen, and industrial may not be appropriate anymore. And so commercial activities start to move into that space, but we never gain back the industrial that gets lost when the commercial comes in and sort of displaces that industrial use. And so that particular need was coming up in Kona, where they were saying, hey, yeah, it says industrial, but it's not industrial anymore, it's really commercial. And therefore we need other industrial to accommodate for that conversion that has happened. So that's just some of the discussion. I think for Hamakua, we have a similar issue of special permits being proposed on ag land because, there's not the readily accessible, available industrial.
So what kinds of industries are being promoted or looked for? And is that in the other
In the economic section, I think most of it though, heavy industrial is, we've kind of hopefully moved away from that a little bit. There are still uses that need to be segregated and not nearby, residential and those kind of facilities. But for the most part, what we tried to do with this effort was look at more of an industrial mix use, where there can be some of that innovation as far as different technologies and different things like that. It's more service industrial uses versus the heavy industrial. And that, again, that service industrial, that tends to be, again, where those special permits. That's the type of uses we get with those requests.
Because we had an agricultural plan here as well, and there's a real need for agricultural centers of.
Yes. Production, yes, definitely. So I don't think there's any mapping component to those because, you can have those productions on agriculture lands. It's more a matter of making sure there's enough infrastructure to support those production facilities.
Definitely, like the tables that you guys had generated for these various land uses, they did list possible zoning, right?
Yes.
So, so I think, just to go back to that and double checking, because I know that from the Hamakua CDP perspective, we focused on more of the cottage industry, light industrial, things that would support the, live work,
Yeah.
agricultural production, and then, like whatever resource, like, for example, would be if we wanted to do growing bamboo for, renewable, whatever, building materials, those types of
The
things.
processing for
Yeah,
those,
that's
yeah.
those types of
Yeah.
things. And, just from a site planning perspective, it would be, you do not put those types of, even some of those uses in sensitive sites, environmental sensitive sites, which is like along the coastline and riparian areas and that such things. And then, so, I think, to look for those areas that would be closer to on the outskirts of the villages where we want to encourage the infill, as well as where most of the infrastructure is from the plantation days. Yes, it may have to be, upgraded for sure. But
The other component I want to mention that Brad just brought up, and forgive me, I'm not giving you guys any orientation, you just have to bear with me while I navigate through. But those tables, that's another thing that we really try to look closely at is exactly. So, right, this table represents those colors that you saw on the screen, represents the description of that, the optimal residential density, if there is any, and then possible zoning designations that could fit in there. So if someone were to come in and try and do a rezone, this tool would say, hey, that doesn't line up, that's not a good match, or it is that. And one of the things that we really did a lot of work on was, you'll see in medium density urban, which tends to be our sort of core village centers. I want to cause a good example of that. We have MCX and ML as possible zoning designations. And those are your commercial, mixed use, and your light industrial. So we are saying that those uses, again, more service oriented, are appropriate in a medium density urban designation rather than having to have an industrial.
Where do solar and wind fields fit in industry? Are those heavy industrial use of?
Those tend to be out in our ag lands.
Yeah, and are they considered heavy industrial use?
I don't know that. I'd have to look at our zoning code.
And we're only gonna get one of those.
Yes. Yes.
And then
There, it's interesting, there's actually something that's being considered right now because City County of Honolulu started taxing them as industrial, but they're only taxing them where the posts sit in the ground. Rather than the whole thing. So, yeah, it's, I think something, right now, we don't consider it industrial. And that's why we keep going to action, because there's probably gonna be some modification over that.
And you can have solar panels over your sheep pasture, but each day, or you can still grow stuff under the solar panels.
Yeah, you can.
It doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to displace agriculture uses to have solar, that's true.
And then, no, we don't have any plastics recycling, but is there any way to reuse plastics?
And I can see that we're gonna need that eventually to have some kind of recycling facilities where we can handle our own trash and not keep.
Absolutely.
We're done cleaning up.
Absolutely.
that-
We do push on solid waste and recycling. In this plan, we do have a zero waste plan for the county. And there are some strategies to get there. Obviously, I think we all know that there's challenges with the recycling industry in general, the way that we have always done it. So we have to find a way to do things differently and be innovative, which again, to our conversation, looking at that innovation and how we can encourage those industries to come here and be innovative to help us solve these big problems that we have. So I would look to the solid waste, which is in that same sustainable development chapter that's under the facility.
Bethany, we have a question from Crystal.
Go ahead, Crystal.
What would there be any sort of adverse impact? If you let, I'm going back to the, sorry, I had my hand up for a while, so I'm going back. And I'm asking this question because I'm not a planner, so I'm not sure what the different nuances are. So if my question, is not, what's the word I want to use, it sounds simple. That's how I'm going to ask it because that's how I understand it. But would there be any adverse impact to the overall process by leaving that designation the way it is now, if the zoning already covers the use?
So again, I just want to point out the purpose of that land use map is to be forward-looking, as Brad was mentioning, right? And so any decisions that are made, any future decisions that are made for that particular area would look to the general plan land use map for that guidance. And so with the current proposal with industrial, that would be the guidance to any future decisions about that property. If you put something different, again, I'm just throwing things, if you put residential, then that would be the, again, sort of guidance to those decisions, future decisions made about that property. So if someone tried to come in and rezone it, we would look to that general plan land use map as to what, we want to see for that property.
Yeah, I understand that, but I understand the process you all went through, but because it's causing some concern or a lot of concern about that designation. I mean, the zoning already, the 2006 zoning, and I apologize, I had difficulty hearing, so if I'm not recounting what I heard correctly, then please correct me. But that 2006 zoning already guides that use. So if you have the GP stay the way it is, wouldn't that be status quo? I mean, wouldn't it still allow the things that it has because the zoning is in place already?
Yes, zoning is what gives you your permitted uses on the property. If they wanted to do something different, then during that review of whatever that different thing is,
yes,
we would look to the general plan for that guidance. But
yes, and then that would be a public process, right?
absolutely, but
yes,
your zoning
yes.
is your permitted uses, it's your setbacks, your height restrictions, it's all the things that say how you can develop the property.
So if anybody wanted to do something different, they would have to go back out to a public process, right? I mean, if they want to do something different, okay.
There is another layer on that property area, which is the special management area, which also requires a public process, but looks at it from a little bit of an environmental lens as far as any impacts that would happen to that special management area. So both of those things would be in play if someone tried to change the zoning for that property. There would be also a special management area review as well.
But just to be clear, the zoning on that property has been the same since 2006, not being changed on this
Yes.
heavy
zoning-
industrial.
This plan is not about zoning, it's about future land use.
I see, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So really, I mean, if we wanted it, you know, from the community sentiment standpoint and the planning sentiment, it would be not showing the heavy industrial in that location. Right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean-
if that's, you know,
That-
again, the feedback that
Yeah.
we're hearing, right?
In terms of the, you know, the value.
It's a tough one, and, you know, these shapes, I'm not really clear. Again, 2005, we had very rudimentary mapping, so I don't really know what that shape is meant to reflect.
Right.
I don't think it's meant to say that the only industrial should happen up closer to the coast
Right.
necessarily. And then I think in the CDP work, there was just a little cleanup of putting it on the parcel. I think that's the only change so that we could find was that parcel. So, anyway, that's why we're doing, this is a public process and open to public comment, but I wanted to provide you guys enough information so that you could make those comments.
So are these maps on GISN that show these?
Yes,
like that?
yes, I
Yeah.
just did some zoom in to
Right.
give some perspective, but all this information is available, publicly.
Takes a little getting used, I mean, I was saying wrong with it, so.
It is, and also I would offer, you know, the plan is available online and there's some feedback around that. We've made it, physical copies available in our libraries for people to access. But you're more than welcome to call our office and come down and use a computer in the office and even, you know, request some time with staff to look at things. You don't have to necessarily have to be able to navigate all this on your own if it's challenging. So that's, again, we're trying, the point of this effort is to get public comment, and so we want to make that as readily available as possible so that we can get that feedback.
Well, Brittany, I have to tell you, if you really wanted to make it readily available, you would provide hard copies to the constituents.
So here's the balance, Richard, with that. There's a cost associated
Yeah, I
with printing
understand
that, and so we know that this is going to change. This is a draft that's out for public comment and is going to change. So we don't want to print hundreds of copies of something that is going to be thrown away in 3 or 4 months. So it is a balance. And we've tried to, you know, again, sort of think about how can we provide enough information and tools for people. You can buy a copy from us always.
Oh, you
But
can buy a
you
copy?
can buy a copy from us,
How
yeah.
much is that?
2220.
2220.
$22?
Yeah, $40 if you go to office.
You can also download it from our website and you can print it on your home printer or protection, whatever. Anyway, just understanding costs and trying to keep them down has been a little bit of a challenge.
Do I have to come into the office to get the
To buy the,
copy?
yes, you do.
You don't take credit cards?
I'll say, Richard, the maps are really rich, like you get way more information with the digital.
Yeah, the
map
hard copy
than the
map
hard
is not good.
So take Bethany up on her offer to show you how to use it, because you'll get way more information interacting with it that way.
Yeah, there is a hard copy here tonight for anybody that wants to look, and although, of course, you know, we have to be able to print these maps in a hard copy form. It's hard to really zero in and zoom in and do different things to understand things on a paper copy.
Bethany, there were 3 requests that kind of brought you here tonight. One was a general presentation on the changes in the general plan. One was, well, what about this increase in the heavy industrial zoning at Huhonua? A third was, well, there is also increase in heavy industrial zoning at Ocala, the old Ocala mill. And I would
That's
presume,
what I've got right here for you.
oh, yes. I would presume that the answer would be the same, that there was no intent to actually increase industrial zoning here for a specific purpose. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
In this case, I believe the, Hamakua CDP already did the work that we would have done, which was to analyze the existing, again, existing zoning and what's actually occurring on the property and remove. Sorry, my mouse is acting up. Oh, there we go. Remove the area along the coast here. So the middle, again, the middle graphic here is what is the existing general plan. On the left-hand side was the adopted Hamakua CDP, and you can see that shape shifting and coming
I see.
inland. And that has been consistent through what is proposed today.
Okay. And there's no intent that there would be some kind of renewed and heavy industrial
No.
use of this area.
No.
Fine.
And again, just to be transparent, we have not gotten any requests from any landowners or agents requesting, things be
Thank you.
shifted. It's purely the analysis that I walked you guys through.
Thank you. Yes. Are there other specific?
One question as far as, some historical perspective from planning in regards to the industrial now. There's the NCX, right? So that's the industrial commercial mix.
Yeah.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but like in Hamakua and even in Hilo, have that proliferation of commercial, retail, kind of going into the industrial area. You
Yeah.
pointed that out. And so that is a sort of interesting phenomenon. It probably has to do with just economics, right? In terms of cheaper building, construction. And so businesses have been drawn to those areas to, the big warehouses and then have retail spaces. And you find that, in Hilo, you find that in Kon in particular, north of Kailo town. And so from what I remember, that, that brought up some concerns, because a lot of those areas were not really heavy industrial, but then became sort of industrial transitioning to sort of a commercial without sort of a lot of the amenities and some potentially some of the impacts that some were close to residential as well. But so is that, I'm just trying to get a handle on that because, the need for having some industrial, desired industrial, sort of, comes with, what that designation, which I think was relatively new historically, correct?
Yeah, and it's underutilized, because for all intents and purposes, people just move into the industrial without the need to go through that process. I was gonna bring up, we did some work on an analysis of this.
The reason why I'm kind of pointing out that from a land use standpoint is that a lot of people have to go to those places to work. And so, and they're not really, just to live, work, vehicle miles traveled is increased in the contrary to where we're trying to go.
Exactly.
And so, it needs to, these types of uses or light industrial need to be located in close to our communities that we want to provide the density for affordable housing and that sort of thing. And so I think to me, that's sort of where, the general plan is to sort of start highlighting those particular areas where infrastructure is sort of there or needs to be upgraded or, better located in proximity to the port. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So some of the work that we did, we looked at other places that are experiencing the same kind of shift. And it's really about shifting from, you know, the industrial revolution, frankly, into a more modern technology where it's less noxious. So we did some work to look at how other places do it, and they had some criteria to think about this area. So this table is showing us existing industrial conditions. And it sort of captures them in transportation, economy, land use. And then it talks about when it's appropriate for those areas to convert to commercial, and what types of conditions are right for that. And so when we looked at this, we wanted to say, here's a tool that we can use for those areas that are transitioning, so that we can capture like, yes, this is appropriate. No, this is not appropriate. So this was meant to give some guidance towards those decision making. But it's kind of a fascinating body of work, just in, you know, from a planning perspective. And then again, focusing on providing that MCX ML zoning designation within our urban density designation, so that especially our villages and town centers can have some of that mixed use happening that's not noxious again and not going to be impactful.
But then at the same time, also upgrading the requirements for those developments, because they tend to
Have
be-
sidewalks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
You know, just
exactly.
walk, you know, just,
Yeah.
Could I ask Bethany?
Procedural
Oh.
question.
Oh, yes.
Is there a projected time to end this meeting?
I'm sorry, what is
Is there a
that?
projected time to end this meeting? You know, just because I think from the public point of view, like, if these meetings run on too long, it's difficult, so.
Well, I completely agree.
Next step.
Oh, yeah, no, but I'm just asking in general, it's be good to have like a time frame before we.
No, I have no time frame.
I didn't think so.
So, but, I will say, back to the committee here, we had decided that there might be, each of us might look at a particular chapter, and if there were concerns or questions that arose from that particular chapter, we might have the opportunity to present that question. Could I ask if there are any of the committee members that would like to ask specific questions or make specific comments about items in the chapters that they've looked at?
So I had questions, but Whitney's answered them.
Yeah, great. Is there any other? Yeah, are there any other questions that have not been answered yet? Or comments? Are there specific issues that you would like to take in regards to the plan as presented? Nothing specific, and
Yeah, I think the thing is, I mean, so honestly, we've had a month since we talked about this, but there is so much there to absorb. I mean, I've got all kinds of notes, but I haven't compiled them into specific questions, you know?
yeah. Bethany, I have a couple of questions just occurred to me. And one was, why has the planning department not decided to make a presentation like you're making to our committee here to the combined action committees? I mean, certainly there is, you know, many of the same issues would arise for each of these various committees.
We have been, so we organized ourselves to do certain components as far as engagement. When I would move to this slide, just to give you some example. So we held the two big informational workshops in Hilo and Kona. We did online workshops that were Zoom, so anybody could participate that way. We've been doing roadshow presentations, and then we've had some informational booths at some of the larger community events. So those roadshow presentations and informational booths, our approach has been that we want to be invited into community. That tends to get more engagement and involvement rather than the planning department setting up a meeting. People don't necessarily come out for that.
Mhm.
And so we've asked community groups to invite us to those things for that purpose. It's just feels a little bit more appropriate and again,
Yeah.
it gets better engagement. So
Right.
we have been invited to different CDP meetings. But we have not organized ourselves to create that for, a joint AC meeting.
You've made a presentation such as tonight to some of the other action committees?
Yes.
Which action committees?
Well, actually, Kona, they didn't have quorum. They were gonna get it. South Kohala,
Uh-huh.
we did for them.
Yeah.
North Kohala doesn't have an action committee, but they have a really engaged community group. And we went and gave that presentation there.
Great.
And we've also been in Hawaii.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's actually excellent.
I do have one question.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've done this or thought about it, but is there some way as you go through this process, or when you get past the process and you're doing implementing different things, sort of like keep a scorecard on, we had these goals and these are the ones that we actually succeeded on, so next time it's a little easier to see things that were achieved and.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of our biggest challenges when we started this update is that there had been no tracking on implementation. And so we had the 2005 going through saying, hey, DPW, did you guys do this roadway?
really.
It just hadn't been done, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But so we tried to orient this draft towards implementation so that we could monitor it more effectively, so that we can say, yeah, we're meeting it, or we're not, and maybe we need to make some adjustment rather than wait until this big comprehensive process.
So we have, as a committee, sort of assigned ourselves to various chapters, and we're, supposedly arrived at some questions and concerns about what is here. And, but, we haven't actually presented anything to you. I'm going to suggest that perhaps each of the individuals on the committee would present, perhaps to me, those concerns and questions which you have developed, and which I can present those to the planning department. If you'd prefer to present those to the planning department yourselves, that's fine, of course.
Like, in regards to that, I had a question. In terms of, like, I did mine on that.
Yes, thank you, Brad.
And so.
Even as recently as a couple hours ago, you were ready.
So anyway, I just wanted to find out. Couldn't figure out a way to, print out something, but it's in there, so I don't know how to, they get it, so I don't know if there's somewhere sorting it so that, we can summarize it.
So I
amongst
can
ourselves.
offer some next steps. And the way that we are strategizing about making sure that everybody's comments get included. We've had community members that just, this platform really isn't working for me. Here's my comments. And part of the positives about using this platform is that I can generate a report. I saw Brad already putting comment in. I can generate a report right now that summarizes all the comments and analyzes them, which is really powerful. And so what we're doing with those comments that people don't put into the platform, we're having staff put them into the platform so that it's transparent, it's all in one place, and we can generate a report.
You guys
So-
using any AI?
Yes, yes. And it continues to improve, actually working with the developers on part of that summary of comments now. Anyway, my point is, you can email us your comments, you can email us your questions, you can, it doesn't have to go through approval of the action committee unless that's a process you guys want to do and to make a formal submittal as an action committee. You're welcome to do that, but individually, anybody can provide that comment, ask us questions, you know, it doesn't have to be, again, sort of a formal,
Right.
unless that's what the body.
Well, the CDP, the statute says that we have Cruiana to make recommendations to amend the general plan. Consequently, I think we should actually act as a unit to make recommendations from the action committee of the community, of the Hamakua Community Development Plan. Consequently, if that is also would be the impression of the committee members, and perhaps we should take a vote on that.
It seems like if we do it together, at least we're educating ourselves and that helps us down the road, so.
I would have a tendency to think that we should put our comments together and make a presentation. And I wonder, after you gather all these comments together, you're going to make a final draft of the plan, and then you're going to present it to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Do you have any problem with our action committee making comments about your final draft
No, absolutely.
to the planning commission as an action committee?
No.
Same thing with the county council. We
Yeah.
can, as an action committee, make comments to the county council.
Just keep in mind that process, again, if there is something substantial that doesn't, that you don't submit to us now and you submit to county council, that will still have to go back through the process, if it wasn't included in that draft package. So I encourage you to engage sooner than later in the process.
Yeah,
So that,
agreed.
and then if there are things that aren't addressed or aren't addressed adequately in your mind.
Yeah.
During that final draft, then you can continue to engage and provide testimony along the way, but asking for people to do the bulk of their work now rather than later in the.
Absolutely. So you're giving us permission to, or you're suggesting that when you make a final draft, will it be presented to the public before it's presented to the planning commission?
It will, I have to think about that process a little bit.
I see. Yeah,
It will be available publicly,
I see. Yeah,
just the way that information presented to the action committee is available publicly.
Yeah.
It will be, that package will be available publicly. I
okay,
don't know if there's gonna be a separate.
right. If you're gonna ask for comments on this, right, at that point,
Yeah.
but, okay, thank you.
Are the comments that people make, is it public in terms of who makes what comments, or is that?
Yes, and that's some of the feedback that we get. You know, some people don't necessarily want their name associated with, this is a very interesting experience just socially. Because anything that comes into our planning department is a public record. And so when I've heard people say they don't want to put their name on their comment, it's interesting to me because it's automatically public, but anyway.
Well, I was gonna just say that, if the action committee would know who's making comments, it gives us an idea of who's got a real interest, and maybe we can recruit more members.
The other thing I can mention, and thank you for bringing that up, I did have, let's see, just a quick update. So far, we have 14 comments from the district of Hamakua, 5 comments from the district of North Hilo, 112 comments from South Hilo, although that may or not be in your Hamakua planning area. And then 5, but not all of them.
Yeah, right.
And then 5 comments within your planning area on the maps. So just to give you guys a sense of where those comments are coming in.
We will, I presume, make this general plan comments a part of the agenda of our January meeting. And so the questions, comments, concerns that you have, let's make sure that you put those in perhaps a written form. And I'd like to actually put that list as an agenda, that we can put in the communication section of the meeting packet. So we have two other items on the agenda, the Hamakua Action Committee's investigation into fire preparedness of the communities in the Hamakua district. And also Mud Lane roadway that runs from Kukui Highway to Mamalahoa Highway. My feeling is that we have reached kind of the limit of our attention, and that it might, well, it might be a good idea that we would I'd like to move to the final item, which is scheduling of future Hamakua Community Development Plan Action Committee meetings.
Since Marissa's been on this whole time from KS, I don't know if she wanted to say anything more.
Oh, yes,
Just because I know her time is, as well as all our.
yes. Can I ask Marissa? Do you have any comments, particularly about the two issues that were of interest to you, the fire preparations for Hamakua and the Hamakua communities and the Mud Lane roadway? Do you have any further comments that you'd like to offer?
Aloha, Ton, and committee and the community. Thank you for having me. I apologize, the meeting went longer, so I'm actually picking up my second child now from sports.
Yeah. Well, you're very versatile.
I just want to say that, express what I shared with Ton earlier and what we've been discussing with Council Chair Kimball over the last almost 2.5 years, really, is our commitment to community resiliency in general, which in this particular case is vegetation management for the purpose of fire risk mitigation. And so Council Chair Kimball was kind enough to invite us to a meeting with the Deputy Fire Chief Moeller last month. And so we've been really focused on increasing our vegetation management efforts statewide, not just in Hamakua, but in this case, we are just talking about Hamakua. So probably next week, we're looking to wrap up a lot of our initial increased management. And then we'll be ready to meet with the fire department in various capacities on additional guidance that they are willing to provide us in general for our lands as they relate to the community. So we look forward to that, and we're thankful for Council Chair Kimball making that connection for us. And then on the note of the fire evacuation road, as I expressed to Ton earlier, KS is always a ready and able participant at the table, especially as it relates to emergency evacuation access. And we've been working over the years, for example, with the county highways and civil defense on emergency access on other areas on the island, like Puna for the lava flow evacuation in both Puna and also the volcano area where the rift zone was affecting roads for residents. So we're absolutely willing, able, and ready to have that conversation when the community, the steering committee, and various agencies and elected officials are ready to discuss that for Mud Lane. I would just say, it has been an issue for us over the years with trespassing over our private lands, which leads to dumping and vandalism and other undesirable activities. So we definitely look forward to a conversation on how that emergency access could be managed, but definitely want to support that request if that's coming from, the community and our officials. So I think that generally sums it up.
Yes, thank you, Marissa. Very helpful. Thank you. We'll continue this conversation, I'm sure. And one comment again, having bearing on that is that the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization has submitted a Hamakua wildfire community something action plan. Yeah, right. And so that is in front of the various agencies that need to sign off on that plan. They indicated to me that the plan is likely to be available for public distribution in January. So we'll be looking forward to that because I think that actually provides a foundation for, well, from where we start. So coming. The final item on the agenda, scheduling future Hamakua Community Development Plan Action Committee meetings. I would hope that everyone feels comfortable with Wednesday, second Wednesday of the month at 5:30. I think the intention would be to try to facilitate a different facilities. I've spoken to the facility at that used to be at NHERC. It's now Co-Education Center in Honokaa. They said that by January, probably their facility would be available. I think it would be more practical than the theater where we've had several meetings. And the library in Lapahoihoi has indicated that beginning in mid-December, and that's why we're not there tonight, I suppose. They're having some other use of their meeting room, and that will go through March. So we may not be able to use that facility for the next couple of months. But would it be okay with everyone that we continue have second Wednesday, 5:30 meetings, and we'll announce where the facility will be? Okay, we'll consider that. Is there any recommendations for agenda items for next month? Yes. Yes.
Hi, it's
Mahealani. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, so the agenda items that we didn't go over this evening, are those getting pushed to January?
I would think so. That would be if you have something that you would like to present or add right now, I think we would be very happy to hear. Otherwise, we will put those on the agenda for January.
Okay. All right. So I do have something real quick, and I know we said at 7:30 we're gonna stop. But I just wanted us to be a little mindful when we are asking the county to have that emergency road as a county maintained road. And maybe Heather can speak to this, because it's like the Waipio Road going down into the valley. I would assume that if the county's county road, therefore everybody can traverse on it. So is there a way to just keep it as an emergency road? Because at our last meeting, the residents from Kukuihaili and up at Mahiki. Also, I know some of the business owners in Honokaa themselves, because this is like a revolving door that has always been happening. Like, oh, they don't want the road to be a bypass road because we want businesses to come to Honokaa. So can Heather speak to that effect, how we can have it be an emergency road to where if there were emergencies like last December when families couldn't get out for a few days and they had no power for 2 days, how that can how that road specifically can just be for emergencies only.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's actually, this is actually a scenario where something that's usually a pain in the butt is actually a good thing, which is that Mud Lane is actually already a county road on paper, but the physical road or trail, whatever you want to call it, is actually on private property, KS's property.
Right.
And so the county would, if we were to use that as a evacuation route, what that would entail would be an agreement with KS, in which case it's probably still private, but we have access across it in an event of emergency. So it's not actually going to be a public road, because what is in reality, the road right now is not ours. What is ours is on paper there, but doesn't physically exist. Does that make sense? Yeah.
No, it totally makes sense. However, if it becomes county maintained, right? Like even in that private property section, if it's county maintained, doesn't that give the county more leverage to be like, hey, we're maintaining the road, we're putting money towards this road, this is not our road?
Yeah, no, interesting. There's actually a piece of legislation that we're working on right now. That's one of the other ones I forgot. Bill 82 allows us to do work on private roadways under certain conditions, including the creation of evacuation routes, but then doesn't give us ownership of that road. So that's actually in council on Wednesday next week. So that concern is legitimate, but I think we've got a legislative fix in place for it.
Okay.
Yeah. And I share your concern, but just so you know, Mahalani, like, I don't think
I know.
an emergency route because of what Marissa mentioned. You know, it's hard to supervise that whole area. It would be a bypass to Honoka'a. So I'm actually would recommend to this group not to consider supporting like a full-on roadway, but an evacuation route makes sense. And I think legally we can set it up so that it is not a quote unquote public road, but it is an access that we can partner with KS to make at least passable for an emergency situations.
Okay, and then I have a question for Marissa real quick. I saw you, Crystal Calamai, just a quick question for Marissa. Would KS be interested in partnering with a community organization to do a ROE section of the road? That way it become the county's, the community's kuleana and not necessarily be the county's kuleana.
Mahia, you were breaking up. Could you repeat that question?
Oh, okay. Sorry. My phone is dying and I have really crappy service and I'm in Honoka'a. So I apologize for that. My question is for Marissa for their private property.
I heard your question, Mahalani.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So I'll repeat it. Your question was, would Kamehameha schools be interested in entering into a right of entry with a community group for care and kuleana of that road, right?
Yes.
So I think in general, we're always open to discussions, right? And it's the details where everything gets figured out. So I think whether the ask be from the community or the county, we're willing to have a discussion.
Okay, cool. Mahalo.
Okay, mahalo.
And then Ton, my last question is for you. January 10th, the second Wednesday, is what we're looking at for our next date.
I'm sorry, say it again.
January 10th?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That sounds approximate, approximately correct. You know, I would like to add that the Hamakua Community Development Plan states that the mud lane to Kukui Haile should be, a study should be done to determine whether that should be a public roadway. And consequently, I think there's almost a kuleana for this group, for our committee, to actually make that proposal to the county. And we had a gentleman present to us last month, Ainsley Liu, who was proposing it, I believe, as his comments were primarily about making the Mud Lane Kukui Highway Connector Road a emergency access route. But in my conversations with him over the past week, he indicated that he believed that most of the people that he had communication with that were living in Kukui Highway and Kapolena would actually like to see that as a public roadway. And so I think the discussion continues. I think we need to continue considering how we will look at this. If our kuleana is to advocate for the directives of the community development plan, then I think we should end up considering very seriously recommending to the county that they do a study of what should be done with the Mud Lane potential connection with Kukui Highway. So are there any further comments, questions? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Hi,
Thank you.
this is my motion.
You know, I would like to thank the planning department for this remarkable